Hello, everyone, and welcome to this lecture on the science of COVID-19. We'll begin. It's a follow. No, sorry. Sorry about this. Just let me do this. So enough of the science to make you understand the rest of this class without going too much in detail. Think of it more of a history of science. We might not like sciences, but we might not like viruses, but viruses make us who we are. 8% of our DNA is made up of ancient viruses. Hard to imagine, we need them. We just need the good ones, not the bad ones, okay? So viruses get a bad rap. Just so you know, most viruses infect plants or oceanic life. And the viruses that do infect us, they don't want to kill us because then we're useless to them. The viruses want us to live so that we could help them reproduce. Okay, how about this? How many of you went to COVID-19's first birthday party in December? Okay. Now, there's something misleading because COVID is lying about his age. He is much older, okay? Not a year old. Could be about 10 years old. And when I say about 10 years old in terms of circulating in a human population, which we believe is in the south of China. In terms of how long it's been circulating in the bats, we don't know. It could be as old as 1,000 years. We just don't know. We can't age it that far back. In other words, COVID has been around for a long time, or I should say more accurately, SARS-CoV-2, the name of the virus. It's only recently started to infect us. And this is, as we're going to look in this lecture, we're going to look at the reason why. Okay, it's hard to imagine. It hasn't been just a year yet. When I first started to use this database, the number was, I remember the first time I found this site, about the number was 300, and half the numbers were on a cruise ship outside of Japan. Hard to imagine. So let's begin with the science. Where do diseases come from? Well, let's look at a couple of videos. So I am going to say bye. Go bye. Okay. And, oh, wrong one. All right.
Friends sing together. La 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 la. Friends do things together. La 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 la. Friends help you when you're in danger. Friends are people who are not strangers. Friends, friends, friends. La 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 la. Friends, 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 friends. La 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 la. Friends.
Fall in love with the outside. Marmot.
Okay, what did we see in that ad? If that marmot might have been, I don't know, just a little bit horny that morning, or if the guy was maybe more attractive and they went for the kiss, they would have killed us all. You see, that furry creature that you know otherwise as a groundhog was responsible for the greatest calamity in human history, the Black Death, the plague of the 1300s that we're going to be studying. It was a bacterium residing in one of these animals in around what is today Mongolia and Central Asia, that when that bacterium made a zoonotic jump, or in other words, a jump from an animal reservoir, probably made the jump this way. One marmot was bitten by a rat, One marmot was bitten by a flea that went on to go bite a rat and infect that rat. And then another flea biting that rat went on to infect a human and then led to the greatest calamity in human history. From this furry creature. Now, the next time you see a groundhog, should you kill it for fear of preventing the next plague? No. We do it anyway because they eat our lawns, right? But it's not the marmots in the US that we should fear. It's usually a marmot in an area where the bacteria resides that we do have to worry about. But fortunately today we have an invention that we don't have to worry so much about getting killed from the Black Death. And that invention is called antibiotics. And you're going to learn in this class, antibiotics can kill a bacterium. Okay? They cannot kill a vaccine. And you're going to learn why in this particular class. But yes, that is a marmot. And occasionally the bacterium that caused the Black Death, Yersinia pestis, is still with us. It's still there. In its height in the 1350s, it killed about 200 million people. Today we have antibiotics to treat it, but it still breaks out every now and then. And yes, in fact, you can still get it in the US. The best rule is to stay away from this animal. Okay. Now, having said that, the last victims of this getting killed from Yersinia pestis was just a year ago. Because unfortunately, for us, it's pretty easy in the US. We stay away from this. It destroys our lawn. Usually we give a little bit of, but in parts of Central Asia, they eat this animal, particularly its raw kidneys, because it's supposed to have good health benefits. It's supposed to. Anyway, yeah, so this, you have to imagine this couple was on the honeymoon. They ordered some raw marmot kidney and they ate it. I shouldn't be laughing, but they died from the plague. Well, that's what you get for eating such a furry animal. Anyway. Yeah, they couldn't get access to antibiotics in time, and that's why they died. Anyway, so okay, now we're going to watch a couple of videos to kind of get a background in the science. No, this has never happened. Oh. Sorry about this, guys. It froze on me. My apologies, it's freezing. I hope it is not freezing for you guys. Just try reloading it.
Usas tus manos para ayudar al prójimo.
Sorry. Okay. So. There we go. Sure. All right. I'm going to turn off my.
At a Maryland County fair in 2017, the prize pigs were not looking their best. Farmers reported feverish hogs with inflamed eyes and running snouts. But while fair officials worried about the pigs, the Maryland Department of Health was concerned about a group of sick fairgoers. Some had pet the pigs, while others had merely been near their barns. But soon, 40 of these attendees would be diagnosed with swine flu. More often than not, sick animals don't infect humans, but when they do, these cross-species infections, or viral host jumps, have the potential to produce deadly epidemics. So how can pathogens from one species infect another, and what makes host jumps so dangerous? Viruses are a type of organic parasite infecting nearly all forms of life. To survive and reproduce, they must move through 3 stages: contact with a susceptible host, infection and replication, and transmission to other individuals. As an example, let's look at human influenza. First, the flu virus encounters a new host and makes its way into their respiratory tract. This isn't so difficult, but to survive in this new body, the virus must mount a successful infection before it's caught and broken down by an immune response. To accomplish this task, viruses have evolved specific interactions with their host species. Human flu viruses are covered in proteins adapted to bind with matching receptors on human respiratory cells. Once inside a cell, the virus employs additional adaptations to hijack the host cell's reproductive machinery and replicate its own genetic material. Now, the virus only needs to suppress or evade the host's immune system long enough to replicate to sufficient levels and infect more cells. At this point, the flu can be passed on to its next victim via any transmission of infected bodily fluid. However, this simple sneeze also brings the virus in contact with pets, plants, or even your lunch. Viruses are constantly encountering new species and attempting to infect them. More often than not, this ends in failure. In most cases, the genetic dissimilarity between the two hosts is too great. For a virus adapted to infect humans, a lettuce cell would be a foreign and inhospitable landscape. But there are a staggering number of viruses circulating in the environment, all with the potential to encounter new hosts. And because viruses rapidly reproduce by the millions, they can quickly develop random mutations. Most mutations will have no effect or even prove detrimental, but a small proportion may enable the pathogen to better infect a new species. The odds of winning this destructive genetic lottery increase over time, or if the new species is closely related to the virus's usual host. For a virus adapted to another mammal, infecting a human might just take a few lucky mutations. And a virus adapted to chimpanzees, one of our closest genetic relatives, might barely require any changes at all. It takes more than time and genetic similarity for a host jump to be successful. Some viruses come equipped to easily infect a new host's cells, but are then unable to evade an immune response. Others might have a difficult time transmitting to new hosts. For example, they might make the host's blood contagious, but not their saliva. However, once a host jump reaches the transmission stage, the virus becomes much more dangerous. Now gestating within 2 hosts, the pathogen has twice the odds of mutating into a more successful virus. And each new host increases the potential for a full-blown epidemic. Virologists are constantly looking for mutations that might make viruses such as influenza more likely to jump. However, predicting the next potential epidemic is a major challenge. There's a huge diversity of viruses that we're only just beginning to uncover. Researchers are tirelessly studying the biology of these pathogens, and by monitoring populations to quickly identify new outbreaks, they can develop vaccines and containment protocols to stop these deadly diseases. Okay, how exactly do vaccines work? We break down why vaccines are safe and necessary in these videos.
Now, with every video I show you, you consider it as a historical document. Let's call it a digital primary source. And when was it produced? August 2019. So just a few months before the pandemic began. And what is it saying? That doctors are always looking for the next mutation and the next virus to emerge. So of course, this tells us a lot and also tells us what was the state of science pre-COVID-19. Okay, the next TED Talk emerges because COVID-19 broke out. Oh, I hate this ad.
With multi-omics, we can simultaneously detect protein
Ugly,
and
ugly,
mRNA
ugly,
expression
ugly
on
creature. All right.
For almost a decade, scientists chased the
Sorry, I don't like interrupting during videos, but for this one I have to. I just want to set it up because they don't say where these mountains are. This is the Yunnan province of China. Remember that place? It's going to be important for the rest of this class. Okay.
source of a deadly new virus through China's tallest mountains and most isolated caverns. They finally found it here, in the bats of Shitao Cave. The virus in question was a coronavirus that caused an epidemic of severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, in 2003. Coronaviruses are a group of viruses covered in little protein spikes that look like a crown, or corona in Latin. There are hundreds of known coronaviruses. 7 of them infect humans and can cause disease. The coronavirus SARS-CoV causes SARS, MERS-CoV causes MERS, and SARS-CoV-2 causes the disease COVID-19. Of the 7 human coronaviruses, 4 cause colds, mild, highly contagious infections of the nose and throat. 2 infect the lungs and cause much more severe illnesses. The 7th, which causes COVID-19, has features of each. It spreads easily, but can severely impact the lungs. When an infected person coughs, droplets containing the virus spray out. The virus can infect a new person when the droplets enter their nose or mouth. Coronaviruses transmit best in enclosed spaces, where people are close together. Cold weather keeps their delicate casing from drying out, enabling the virus to survive for longer between hosts, while UV exposure from sunlight may damage it. These seasonal variations matter more for established viruses, but because no one is yet immune to a new virus, it has so many potential hosts that it doesn't need ideal conditions to spread. In the body, the protein spikes embed in the host cells and fuse with them, enabling the virus to hijack the host cell's machinery to replicate its own genes. Coronaviruses store their genes on RNA. All viruses are either RNA viruses or DNA viruses. RNA viruses tend to be smaller, with fewer genes, meaning they infect many hosts and replicate quickly in those hosts. In general, RNA viruses don't have a proofreading mechanism, whereas DNA viruses do. So when an RNA virus replicates, it's much more likely to have mistakes called mutations. Many of these mutations are useless or even harmful, but some make the virus better suited for certain environments, like a new host species. Epidemics often occur when a virus jumps from animals to humans. This is true of the RNA viruses that cause the Ebola, Zika, and SARS epidemics, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Once in humans, the virus still mutates, usually not enough to create a new virus, but enough to create variations or strains of the original one. Coronaviruses have a few key differences from most RNA viruses. They're some of the largest, meaning they have the most genes. That creates more opportunity for harmful mutations. To counteract this risk, coronaviruses have a unique feature, an enzyme that checks for replication errors and corrects mistakes. This makes coronaviruses much more stable, with a slower mutation rate than other RNA viruses. While this may sound formidable, the slow mutation rate is actually a promising sign when it comes to disarming them. After an infection, our immune systems can recognize germs and destroy them more quickly if they infect us again, so they don't make us sick. But mutations can make a virus less recognizable to our immune systems and therefore more difficult to fight off. They can also make antiviral drugs and vaccines less effective because they're tailored very specifically to a virus. That's why we need a new flu vaccine every year. The influenza virus mutates so quickly that new strains pop up constantly. The slower mutation rate of coronaviruses means our immune systems, drugs, and vaccines might be able to recognize them for longer after infection and therefore protect us better. Still, we don't know how long our bodies remain immune to different coronaviruses. There's never been an approved treatment or vaccine for a coronavirus. We haven't focused on treating the ones that cause colds, and though scientists began developing treatments for SARS and MERS, the epidemics ended before those treatments completed clinical trials. As we continue to encroach on other animals' habitats, some scientists say a new coronavirus jumping to humans is inevitable. But if we investigate these unknowns, it doesn't have to be devastating. Students and teachers all over the world did their part to help slow the spread of COVID-19 by staying home. But what about their graduation ceremonies? Learn more about TED's global...
Okay. Oh, I should have stopped that video. Hold on. All right. Now for the next video. So what's the important part of that, or the information that's important to focus on in that video? It's the following. How many coronaviruses has the species Homo sapiens been exposed to? 7. 4, right? Before the year 2000. And when we say before the year 2000, that means over the span of the last 5,000 years, and this is a rough estimate, but easily 5,000, it could be further, 6,000, even 7,000. 4 coronaviruses made the jump from an animal into the human population. Then the year 2000 passed. 2003, 2008, and most likely 2019. And I say that because it's probably a bit older. You've had 3 new coronaviruses enter the human population. And I want you to consider then, why is this happening? Where in the span of 20 years, you've had almost as many coronaviruses as over the last 7,000 years. Okay. And the answer is this. It is, the world is growing, it's modernizing, it's doing more mass stuff like mass traveling and mass chopping down of forests and making it more vulnerable to these zoonotic jumps, these viral zoonotic jumps from animal populations to humans. Okay, so I showed you 2 videos on how viruses work. I want to show you another video that also deals, it's not a science video, but it also deals with how viruses function.
I'd like to share a revelation that I've had during my time here. It came to me when I tried to classify your species. I realized that you're not actually mammals. Every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with the surrounding environment, but you humans do not. You move to an area and you multiply and multiply until every natural resource is consumed. And the only way you can survive is to spread to another area. There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus. Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague, and we are the cure.
All right, a bit of popular culture explaining how viruses function. Okay, now go back to the lecture. Lecture, where are you? Where are you? Okay. Very good. There we are. All right. So let's just kind of use those videos and review. What have we learned? This is the virus. The area in green is this protein shell. The spikes or the crowns are the protein receptors that hook onto another receptor, particularly in our respiratory system. Okay. The blue is the RNA chain, or in other words, the directions to recopy itself, reproduce itself, the directions to the infected cell. And because it's protein, let's look at the next image, because it's protein. That's why washing the hands are essential, because when you wash your hands with soap, what do? You dissolve its protein shell, and it just becomes a useless, inactive RNA. It just goes down the drain. Okay. Now, to set up the next video I'm going to show you this is not just only science, but it's science for an important purpose, particularly in the US. Particularly because it deals with a conspiracy theory that was circulated amongst the top echelons of our government under the last administration, and that the virus is a biological weapon created by humans, particularly in China. So Darwinism is the next ism we're going to be dealing with in this class. And what is Darwinism that makes it modern? It's the following. Darwinism argues that the masses of all the mass of human life on Earth is the product of natural selection. Natural selection is basically occurs over thousands of years. Unnatural selections is when humans intervene in the natural process, such as when we breed dogs, for example, particularly for their value at dog shows, prize dogs. When we breed them, that's unnatural selection. We are doing the selection on behalf of the dogs. And when you make a biological weapon, that is unnatural selection. Okay? You are designing a pathogen to cause an infection against your enemy. That's so basically when you spread the theory that it's a biological weapon, you're arguing for unnatural selection. Of course, Darwinism, what makes it modern? Well, it's a refutation of the pre-modern belief that all living things on our Earth are a result of God's design and that they remain unchanging over time. And of course, that's why Darwinism and Christianity are kind of at a loggerhead. Okay. Now, this gets tricky because, of course, what does Darwinism basically refute? The story of Noah's Ark, for example, that all the surviving animals on this earth are a result of the survivors of the flood. Now, so in other words, that is the big clash between science and religion. Darwinism didn't say outright that God or a supernatural deity did not create life on the earth, you see. Okay. But or I should say Darwin himself didn't take that. Remember, Darwin himself trained for a career to become a priest, ironically. But that's, and of course, a lot of us have, the pre-modern belief that, all living beings were created by an intelligent designer or a deity. Okay. But that is an argument for another class. All we need to see in this video is an argument about how Darwinism explains why the virus was most likely the product of natural selection rather than a deliberate design in the lab. So with every video, like I said, we always have to look at the date because the date is giving us the time in which it emerged. It's like a primary document. And this would be February 27th, 2020. This is about a little bit more than a week before the declaration of a pandemic. The pandemic would be declared on March 11th. But the rumors of it being a biological weapon had already spread, that it was a Chinese biological weapon. All right.
by our viewers on patreon.com/stated clearly. Stated Clearly presents Where Do New Viruses Come From? If you've been watching the news, you've probably heard of the novel or new coronavirus, which, starting in late 2019, began making people ill in China. International air travel has since allowed it to spread person to person to new countries, as governments began to issue travel restrictions and even quarantines. Speculations about the origin of the virus began to spread online. Some claim that the virus might be a genetically modified weapon, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This claim currently seems highly unlikely. Others suggest that the virus may be an escaped lab specimen. Now, this actually is possible. Viruses have escaped from research labs in the past, but as of the time that I'm recording this voiceover, investigations into this idea have not yet reached any solid conclusions. Could there be another, more natural explanation for the origin of this virus? The answer is yes. COVID-19, the new human-infecting coronavirus, may have simply evolved from an older animal-infecting coronavirus. To understand how this may have happened, let's first take a look at viruses in general. What are viruses? Of the many things that can make you sick by infecting and reproducing inside you, viruses are among the smallest. If we resize this drawing to a more realistic scale, you see that hundreds of viruses can fit inside a single bacterial cell. That's how tiny they are. Thousands of different viral species have been studied and described by scientists so far. Millions more likely exist. They come in many forms, but all species consist of a small collection of genes, stretches of either DNA or RNA that carry information for making more copies of the virus, and those genes are enclosed in a protective coating of protein and sometimes a lipid membrane. All known viruses are parasitic, but most are not parasitic to humans. Instead, some only target plant cells, others only infect bacteria, and so on. A virus reproduces by getting its genes into a living cell. Different viruses do this in different ways, but once inside, the cell acts as if the viral genes are its own genes. It begins reading them and building copies of the virus instead of performing its normal tasks. Coronaviruses are a huge family of virus species that infect animal cells. Some infect chickens, others infect pigs, some infect humans, but most of them are extremely mild. They simply give you the common cold. Corona means crown and refers to the unusually large crown-like spikes sticking out of their membranes. These protein spikes are selectively sticky, sort of like Velcro. They don't attach to most objects but are extremely sticky when they bump into specific molecules found on the outsides of animal cells. Once held firmly in place, the coronavirus waits until swallowed by the cell. It then begins to reproduce at the cell's expense. Different animal species have different types of molecules on the outsides of their cells. Because of this, bird-infecting coronaviruses usually can't infect humans. Their Velcro doesn't hold strong enough to our cells. Unfortunately, the natural process of evolution can sometimes help a virus overcome this problem. When virus genes are being copied during reproduction, mutations can occur. These are either due to simple copying errors or processes called reassortment and recombination. These happen when two or more viruses infect a single cell. In most cases, mutations that change the shape of viral spikes render the virus useless. Their Velcro no longer sticks to any host cells. On rare occasions, however, a chance mutation will just happen to allow a virus to attach to a new host species. If the modified virus is then lucky enough to encounter that new host species, infection can occur. We call this a spillover infection. The virus has spilled over into a new type of host. Early on, during a spillover event, the virus usually isn't very good at infecting its new host. Its Velcro is not a perfect match, and many other challenges might slow the virus down. Oftentimes, the mutations that let it infect the new host also make it worse at infecting its original host. Because of this, many spillover viruses go extinct after infecting just 1 or 2 people. They're usually dead ends. That said, if the virus can survive and reproduce just long enough, natural selection will promote any new mutations that help it better spread and reproduce in the new host population. Positive mutations accumulate over multiple generations, negative mutations are discarded until, bam, a new epidemic is being screamed about on the news. Though it may seem to us that these new viruses just sort of pop into existence overnight, scientists now know there is a long, slow burn before each explosion. Genetic evidence tells us that slowly evolving spillovers have been the cause of almost every major outbreak known in history. In the early 2000s, a coronavirus that used to only infect bats appears to have spilled over into civets. There, it mutated even further and spilled over into humans. We called it the SARS virus because it causes severe acute respiratory syndrome. It spread internationally from person to person, and several scientists were infected in the lab. By the time the virus was contained, over 8,000 people had been infected, over 700 died. A coronavirus from camels also recently spilled over to humans, causing even more deaths. Coronaviruses are not the only types of animal viruses that can adapt to new hosts. HIV spilled over from chimps, most likely when someone cut themselves while preparing chimp meat for dinner. The swine flu came partly from pigs, but we think it actually evolved through a recombination with a pig virus and a bird virus. The 1918 Spanish flu, the big one that devastated populations all around the world, may have spilled over from chickens. While the evidence is not yet conclusive, the new coronavirus might just be one more example of normal evolution. A very similar virus has been found in bats, and another was recently discovered in pangolins. These animals are endangered, they're protected, but they're often used illegally for food, rituals, and alternative medicine in the region where COVID-19 first broke out. Now, there are serious people checking to make sure that the virus did not come from a lab, either by accident or on purpose. After all, the technology to genetically modify viruses really does exist, but it's important to understand that the normal process of descent with modification, acted upon by natural selection, really does produce new viruses. It happens naturally. The chance of a virus evolving to successfully infect a new species is extremely low, but there are over 7.5 billion people on this planet. Most of us interact with animals on a daily basis. We keep them as pets, we eat them as food. This means that, as unlikely as spillover infections might be, there are billions of opportunities for one to take hold every single day. Add this to the fact that the entire world is now connected through international flights, and you realize that what happens in Vegas doesn't actually stay in Vegas, at least not the way that it used to. Luckily, we have international groups like the World Health Organization and various centers for disease control to help contain outbreaks when they happen. With international cooperation, we have prevented many catastrophes in the past, and we will prevent many more in the future, so long as our species continues to work together. So, in summary, where do new viruses come from? In most cases, new viruses evolve from old viruses. Stopping the spread of new viruses requires international cooperation. For up-to-date, accurate information on the risks, visit the World Health Organization website at who.int. I am John Perry, and that is the novel coronavirus stated clearly. This episode of Stated Clearly was funded by our viewers on patreon.com/Stated Clearly. If you found this video helpful, please do consider contributing there as well. Aside from helping me out, you will also get secret access to a Stated Clearly animation that is no longer public. It's actually the first one.
Sorry, didn't mean to advertise. Just had trouble getting the start screen to work. Okay. So there we have a source. Now, I have to update this. While scientists I would say uniformly agree that this is not a biological weapon. At a WHO, and that is a World Health Organization mission, went to China to investigate the possibility of this being a accident. In other words, the virus might have escaped from the lab. And the Chinese government hasn't been cooperative. Okay, this is as much as we know, as much as we can know. The strain that circulated early in Wuhan, which is also the location of the lab, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, is a different strain than what the lab had. Okay, but again, having said that, the ability of the WHO to conduct kind of a transparent investigation has been stymied as a result of the Chinese government not cooperating. So let us review. So far, we've been looking at the pathogen, the bacteria. I'm sorry, let's start with the order. Sorry. The smallest of the pathogens are the virus. And that is because they're small because simply what they're made up of, an RNA or DNA chain. And think how small that is, right? It wasn't until the 1930s with the invention of the electron microscope that humans for the first time could see at what caused the most amount of death in human history. You see how much bigger a bacteria is? So a bacterium is a full-fledged organism, and a virus such as this T-fork, where is the COVID? Because this was produced before SARS-CoV-2 came out. It's a little bit bigger than the HIV virus. Viruses can infect the bacterium. This is the reason why antibiotics only work against bacteria. It's this. Because they could kill something that is biological. By definition, a virus is not a biological organism. It is the stuff that makes up biological organisms, you see. That's the difference. They're entirely two different things. In other words, virus and bacteria are completely two different things, but they both make us sick because they are foreign elements. And our immune system doesn't like them and goes on the attack. And that's what makes us sick, is our immune system. Okay. What we call the cold, or you getting sick, is not caused by the virus or the bacterium per se, okay? It is the immune system trying to destroy that foreign element. Okay, the fever, for example, you get, is your immune system trying to heat your body so that it kills all the viruses. And when you get a fever, what does that do? That takes a lot of energy. It takes away, that's why your muscles feel sore, because the energy that goes to your muscles is now going for this overheating of your body. That's why it's always said you have to take a lot of fluids, because the heating of your body is basically going to dehydrate you. That's why you need a lot of fluids to keep the body working. The coughing, sneezing, the mucus, all of that is to get the mucus, the virus out of your body. Yeah, so in other words, when you're getting what we call getting sick is actually your immune system doing its job. And that's what makes you feel sick, because when the immune system gets activated, it causes inflammation of various parts of your body. When we take Tylenol, Tylenol reduces the inflammation cost. It does nothing to end the virus inside of your body. It just kind of alleviates the pain that is caused to you as a result of the immune system doing its job. Now, with a foreign virus like SARS-CoV-2, particularly if you're older, you notice when you're young or like kids can get over a cold like that. Well, that's just by definition the way the immune system works. Once you get older, your immune system becomes really inefficient. It takes much longer to get over a cold. And also when you're older, when a new virus enters the body that it hasn't recognized, the immune system really worries and attacks it with everything it has. And that often leads to death. This is the irony, the paradox. Yeah, the immune system that protects you at old age, it can also kill you by going into overdrive. Because sometimes when it goes into overdrive, it damages the lungs in the process. And when you damage the lungs, you open yourself up for a pneumonia, an infection from pneumonia, which is often caused by bacteria. And yeah, that's what is the problem with this novel coronavirus. Sorry. So when we look here now, what is this mind? Well, the C mind is basically mimicking a design created by natural selection. The virus works just like C mind. The C mine uses a spike protein, well, not a spike protein, a spike to attach to a ship, then explodes, destroying the ship. The protein, the spike protein of a virus does the same. It just explodes a chain of RNA into your cells. That causes all the damage. This is an actual game called COVIDopoly. I just, let's pay an homage and say goodbye to the coronaviruses. Now we've learned what a coronavirus is. A pathogen we've studied now. Viruses, bacteria, and then a much bigger pathogen is a protozoa. That's what causes malaria. Okay? So just so you know the difference between the three forms of pathogens. Okay, so the little coronaviruses say bye. Now let's look at this guy. Who is this guy? Who just loves bats and even has a mask protecting him? This is my nephew. Okay. Do you notice he loves living things? That's why I bought him a mask with snakes on it. I should say living gross things. So here he is protecting his bat. Now, why is my nephew fascinated with bats? Okay. For one, what is the bloody hell is a bat? Okay. It's none of these. I would say a bat is kind of like a flying mosquito. And it spreads, just like mosquitoes can spread a lot of things that make us feel poorly, so do bats. I want you to look at, we'll look at this ending anyway. I want you to look at this. So these are the various, hey, there's looking at you, kid, all the various bats around the world. And I want to show you a video. Why did I refer to my nephew? My nephew will probably grow up to be one of these guys you see in the following video. Okie dokes. Let me get out of here. All right. Look at those questions that were asked. And again, if we look at when this video was produced, it tells us a lot. It was produced on ABC March 7. Now think of that. That's 3 days before the pandemic was declared by the WHO. And really a week before it started to really spread in the US. Okay. In other words, if we look at those questions, right? Sorry, I'm gonna turn off my video because I gotta move it and I don't wanna make you guys. In other words, look at those questions. Is it spread by the air? We didn't know back then. We thought it was primarily spread by surfaces. Look at those questions back then. And what do we know? At the present, 80, hell, sorry, excuse my language. 80% of the cases are spread through aerial transmission, okay? Or the more scientific term, through inocula. And what is inocula? It's well, I'm creating inocula now in this sense. If I was to be affected, my voice would be spreading the viruses in an invisible cloud. If I coughed or sneezed, I would just spread that cloud quicker. Okay, and that's why we are wearing masks now. But back then, we thought it was through fomite transition. And what is a fomite? Just in case I haven't told you yet, it is that we thought the virus would land on a surface. You touch that surface, you touch your face, and then you get infected. That's about maybe 15 to 20% of the infectious cases. So what did this video on bats demonstrate? Bats? Oh, so sorry. You're giving me trouble today. Okay. Bats are, like mosquitoes, a vector of the pathogen. So we looked at the kind of microbes, the microbes that infect us, we call them pathogens. The vector is the animal that carries it. We've already looked at 3 now: the marmot, the bat, and of course, the mosquito is the most deadliest animal on Earth to us humans because it carries so many pathogens. Anything from a virus, like the Zika virus, or the virus that causes dengue fever, or West Nile fever. It carries protozoas, such as the one that causes malaria. Bats carry a lot of viruses. Okay, so now, hey, there's looking at you, kid. Yeah, so what do these lovely creatures? That's a vampire bat, actually. And the vampire bats do suck on blood. It works just like a mosquito. It has sharp incisors for slicing flesh, anticoagulant saliva. Just like bats, because what is your blood wants to do immediately when there's a wound? It's going to try to heal it. And they put the saliva in your body that prevents your blood from doing the job. And that saliva, your body doesn't like it. And that's why you get these kind of red bumps after a mosquito bite. So what do the virus hunters do? Well, yeah, they look at these bats, try to identify them and look at their potential. Now look how small this bat is in its hand. Well, let's see how big bats can get, such as this one, otherwise known as the flying fox. The flying fox is, it looks like a fox when its wings are open. It's one of the other families of bats. This is its wingspan. You probably can't visualize how big this wingspan is, but imagine waking up and seeing this outside of your house. Again, you're not sure how big it is. That's how big a flying fox can get. Okay. Fortunately, flying foxes only eat fruit, but that's also part of the problem, and I'll tell you why. They're a fruit bat, in otherwise. Other bats, what do bats like to eat? Fruit. The vampire bat likes to chow down on blood, but bats mostly eat mosquitoes. And that's a very valuable service because out of the mosquitoes they like to eat, includes mosquitoes. And the insects they like to eat includes mosquitoes. Imagine walking into a cave. These are all flying foxes, or walking in a forest and you just see these critters in the trees, all flying foxes. And this is the skies above Australia. Flying foxes. So like I said, they live in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Australia. Where we go there. Now let's look at this film that deals with why flying foxes only eat fruit. How do they cause problems? Well, this film, Contagion, the final scene of Contagion, gives you the answer. Okay. Okay, so how did the film Contagion end? This isn't really a spoiler alert because I've been giving you the spoiler throughout the entire class. Okay, it ended this way. Yeah, deforestation led to the dispersion of the flying fox. I had to search for other areas to get fruit. They found fruit in a place near a farm. It chowed down, and a piece of that fruit got into the pigsty. The pig ate it and got infected, and the infected pig gave it to a human. Now, Contagion is a Hollywood film, but this is based on a real life virus called the Nipah virus. That's how the Nipah virus outbreak began in Malaysia in the 1990s. Very recent disease. And the thing with Nipah virus, we'll be dealing with the film Contagion in this class. But Nipah, unlike SARS-CoV-2, which goes for the lungs, Nipah goes for the brain, and it kills you. In other words, Contagion was asking a what-if question. What if Nipah was highly contagious? And if there was a pandemic of Nipah, what would the world look like? Anyway, fortunately, the Nipah virus, deadly virus, but that's the problem, it was deadly. And viruses don't really survive if they kill the person, but it was also contained early. And then that's why, fortunately, we didn't have a massive lockdown in the 1990s. Okay, so this is all dealing with the bat as a vector. And the bat was most likely a vector for SARS-CoV-2. And how do we know that? Because it was earlier a vector for SARS-CoV-1 in 2003. Now, of course, this is just a joke from The Onion. By the way, this animal can self-replicate its lost limbs. By the way, this is a Nahau word. It's pronounced Asholo, because in Nahau, the language of the Aztecs, you don't pronounce the TL at the end. Hence, it's Nahuatl. That's how it's spelled, but you pronounce it Nahau. Anyway, amphibian native to Mexico can regenerate lost limbs. I think a virus from there that would infect us would be cool. It would make us like the guy in Deadpool. But anyway, okay, the next vector, the duck. And the duck is responsible for the various influenzas. Some viruses love bats, some other viruses love ducks. And the problem with ducks is this. Look how the distance they travel. Okay? They fly south for the winter, and that's problematic. Now, what is problematic? Ducks, when they get sick, they might infect chickens, hence where we call it avian flus. The problem is when ducks come close to pigs, disaster strikes. And then what do you have to do to the pigs before they infect us? Well, you have to basically kill them all. Now, if you know anything about Chinese cuisine, eating bats, it's not really a delicacy in China. There's a lot of countries that eat bats, but particularly in Wuhan, that's a cultural myth that they like eating bats. What is in Chinese food, there's a lot of, it's duck and pork. And that is a disaster. Because as more Chinese become affluent, they could afford these animal proteins. And when ducks and pigs intermingle, that is usually the source of the next pandemic. And so, yeah, this is what you have to do is mass slaughter the pigs. Why the ducks? Because they're wild, but usually when they land in places and if there's pigs around, then disaster happens. Okay, the cow by itself isn't a problem. It's people like Julia who cause problems when they come into close contact with cows. Now, this is a joke. We all come into close contact with cows for their milk. We eat them, right? What have cows given us over history? Diseases such as smallpox, the deadliest killer of all human history, measles, and another deadly bacterium called tuberculosis. Okay. Yeah, Julia getting close to this cow is not a good idea. Now, of course, the cow is going to be important, right? If we look at this image here, particularly for the US, notice how with vaccinations, the infectious rate from deaths decrease. What is the connection with the cow and vaccinations? Well, you'll find out in the following video.
So, where were we? Oh, right. Our group of disease survivors moved out and started a new settlement. They cleared more land, they planted more seeds, and after a while, they figured out how to tame a handful of wild animals. This was a very exciting development for germs. For the first time in history, humans started living in close contact with other animals, 24/7, milking them, taking care of them, living with them, and eating them. All that touching and sharing gave animal germs plenty of chances to get inside of us. Like measles, researchers think that up until about 5,000 years ago, it didn't exist, but its older cousin rinderpest, a cattle disease, did. Now that humans were spending so much quality time with cows, little rinderpest germs started jumping over into us, and a few of them had a lucky mutation that allowed rinderpest to evolve from a cattle disease into measles, a deadly human virus. As if that wasn't bad enough, something else was happening right around this time that supercharged the amount of damage this new measles virus could do. There were now a lot more humans around, living much closer together. And when the world's first cities hit the 500,000 mark, that meant measles and other germs could spread from one person to another and never run out of new people to infect, even though they were killing us off at a record pace. Scientists think measles, along with other nasty diseases like mumps, diphtheria, scarlet fever, and whooping cough, all evolved to live permanently in humans around this time. But our ancestors had no idea what the problem was or how to fix it. One common solution? Run away. But this usually ended up just spreading the new diseases to new people and new places. And the better the roads got, the faster the germs could travel. When people figured out how to sail around the world, the new germs came with them. The results weren't pretty. In the centuries after Columbus's voyage across the Atlantic, some estimates say 90% of the entire native population of the Americas died, mostly from diseases the Europeans brought with them. Not to be outdone, the newly named Americans likely sent syphilis back the other way to wreak havoc on the sex lives of Europeans. So this golden age of discovery was also a golden age for germs. They ruled the high seas and everything in between. They never had it so good until this happened. Humans get along pretty well with most microbes, which is lucky because there are a lot more of them in the world than there are of us. We couldn't even live without many of them. But a few hundred have evolved and are still evolving to exploit our bodies in ways that can make So, where were we? Oh, right. Our group of disease survivors moved out and for most of human history, we had a lot of bad ideas about how we were getting sick. Angry gods, misaligned planets, stinky fumes, and plenty of bad ideas about how to prevent it, like bloodletting, large holes in the head, arsenic. Things started changing only about 200 years ago. An English doctor named Edward Jenner decided to take a closer look at a promising folk remedy. See, milkmaids, they'd get these blisters on their hands, cowpox blisters. People said that if a milkmaid got cowpox, she would never get its deadly cousin smallpox. So our doctor decided to put this milkmaid wisdom to the test. His first step? He wiped gunk from cowpox blisters into a cut he made in the arm of his gardener's 8-year-old son, James Phipps. Sorry, James. James got better pretty quickly because cowpox is usually mild in humans. Then, the doctor made his bold and risky move. He injected James with the similar but deadly smallpox. James didn't get sick. The milkmaid cure had worked. And with that, Jenner invented vaccination. Here's how it works. When you inject weaker germs into our bodies, our immune system takes care of the problem and stays on the lookout for similar-looking germs. So when the really bad guys come, we're ready for it. This was our first safe and effective way to fight disease. About time. After that, things started happening fast. Over the next 150 years, researchers from all over the world joined this fight against germs, discovering them, developing vaccines, killing bacteria with antiseptics and antibiotics. So what did that do for us? Consider that in 1900, the average person lived only about 30 years. Today, most of us live to 70. We were so successful in such a short time. In 1967, the US Surgeon General reportedly exclaimed that we had closed the book on an infectious disease. But the truth is more complicated. See, what happened way back in episodes 1 and 2, when humans were cutting down forests and catching new germs from wild animals? That's still happening, but now it's on a scale our ancestors never could have imagined. We've cleared about half of our planet's arable land, and we're still cutting. Remember, these wild places are where undiscovered germs live. By getting rid of their homes, we're forcing them to find new ones near us. And there are more of us than ever living closely with animals. Throw in some planes, and the next thing you know, a new germ can turn into a worldwide pandemic practically overnight. Think SARS, HIV, Ebola, bird flu, Zika. These are just some of the viruses plaguing us right now. And we haven't even mentioned antibiotic resistance. So the story continues. Some scientists say the next chapter is us looking for ways we can live together with germs. Germs in their homes and us in ours. Let's just hope our big brains keep working overtime so we find a way to stay one step ahead of that nasty bunch of fast-changing, human-killing microbes, the germs.
So let's look at the date of these videos, 2017. And it's amazing because they anticipated a lot of the issues we would be dealing with in 2019. Notice the image of what we assume is a kind of Chinese wet market and the viruses going on a plane and spreading around the world. Well, where did they get the idea from? From the past, from 2003 in SARS. That's where it emerged. Okay, I'm gonna pause here and I'll finish this up a bit later. I just finished this up and yeah, talk to you later, but we're almost reaching the end of the allocated time. So we'll stop here with vaccines and continue with them a bit later.